The name of this session may look a bit daunting. Using the terms AI, DLT, and corporate actions within the same phrase may sound ambitious to some of you, but we will spend the next half hour explaining why the future of corporate actions management may be at our fingertips. I would like to first introduce our esteemed guests, Stephanie Lheureux, Head of Digital Assets at Euroclear, and Angie Walker, Global Head of Banking and Capital Markets at Chainlink. My name is Kelli West. I am Head of Securities and FX Strategy at Swift, and I will be moderating the session today. I would also like to take the time, because we spoke real quickly before the panel about the fact that we're discussing AI and DLT, and it's an all-female panel, so we're really proud of that, and it shows how far we've come so far. So let's get started. Corporate actions processing is deemed to be one of the most complex areas of post-trade and is one of the most complex and costly unstructured data problems in the financial world. According to research conducted by Value Exchange and ISA, today's inefficient corporate actions processes cost regional investors, brokers, and custodian businesses approximately $3 to $5 million each annually, with 75% of firms revalidating custodian and exchange data manually. Globally, around 70% of business units have been paying over $2 million each due to corporate actions errors, with some paying as much as $43 million. Data was the root cause of 56% of these errors. This includes inconsistencies in structure, format, terminology, timeline, medium, and data standard for dissemination. Taking this into account, I turn to Stephanie for my first question. What is the right balance between standards and technology?
We do have some standards when it comes to corporate action because, coming from Swift, that the industry, at least in the post-trade world and all the intermediaries, are using Swift and Swift and MT564, this kind of standard to communicate. But when we hear these numbers from the Value Exchange, and we know it, it's not enough. It's good, we have standard, we can communicate, but it's not enough because we still have some discrepancies in the way the data or the dates or the amount are recorded in a system. We also have some business rules which are not the same, meaning when you are receiving this data from different sources, it's not always the same data that you are receiving for the same event. So we can see that even if we have standard in the industry, it's not enough to solve the problems. So I think that's where new technologies can play a big role to help us first have a golden source and distribute and share this golden source amongst all the participants of the value chain of the industry. That's one part, and we will talk about that, and that's the role of DLT and what DLT can play in that. And then the other thing is we are extracting the information, and we are all working to standardize this data or extract and have that in that kind of format, but it's coming from unstructured data at the beginning. It's coming from press release, it's coming from general meetings, it's coming from prospectus. So it's important to see how new kind of technology, AI, LLM models, these kind of things can help us accelerate this process of extracting the data, normalizing the data, and creating this kind of golden source for the industry to share and rely on.
All right. So Stephanie, you mentioned two keywords, AI and DLT, as two key technologies that can help streamline this area. Let me now turn to Angie and ask the simple question of why. Why are these new technologies a great new opportunity?
Yeah, it's a great question. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here with Kelli and Stephanie. So just to go back to Stephanie's point, I think we just to recap on the problem. The problem is that the data we're using is unstructured data. It's coming from PDFs, from emails, from documents. It's very difficult for individual organizations to independently reach consensus on that sort of, if you like, the unified golden record that they need to use in order to facilitate the corporate actions obligations. So from a technical point of view, we have brought together two very powerful technologies, which actually collectively become even more powerful, which is the combination of AI and blockchain. And what we've actually done is we've basically used the combination of we've used AI and large language models to consume those unstructured documents and by using multiple large language models and AI, and data oracles, we've been able to meet consensus on what is that unified golden record. So that's very important. What we've done is we haven't singled out an individual AI solution where we're just consuming that data into a single large language model. We've actually used multiple large language models, and then off the back of that, achieve consensus across that set of results in order to, if you like, ratify the unified golden record. So that combination of AI and blockchain and cross-chain interoperability is the first time we've ever used those together, and we are very, very pleased with the results we've got. And initially it was quite a high-touch experiment. It wasn't that we were doing anything in the way of trying to optimize or customize the outputs of the large language models. Two other things. So we've effectively, by consuming that unstructured data into the LLMs, we now are reading that in a machine readable form rather than it being in a human form. That makes a massive difference, not just in terms of the amount of data that we can consume, but it also means it allows us to consume the data from a much larger variety of different sources, and the more sources you consume it from, arguably the better that unified golden record becomes. And then the last part that is worth pointing out is, obviously, if we're able to consume data from different sources and then we're able to create this sort of unified golden record off the back of this consensus between the different large language models, and arguably the more of them we use, the more accurate the consensus becomes. Then if we can then start to introduce standards into that unified golden record, and we can apply established standards like ISO, so that the unified golden record that we then push out and disseminate to the chains of the individual consumers, or to the individual consumers, not necessarily via blockchain, it could be via blockchain and existing infrastructures, then what we're actually distributing back out to the consumers is something that's already been restructured in an ISO standard format. So there's sort of three steps to it, and the challenge is in three parts, if you like. One is the consumption of the unstructured, which we're able to do through the LLMs and make them machine readable, which is a big step in the right direction. The second, and probably the most important, is that we're not doing that on a single LLM. We're doing it across multiple LLMs, which means that we achieve consensus through the decentralized oracles. And that's very important, because that stops any potential issues with things like hallucinations, which you might get with a single LLM. And then the third step is when we then create that unified golden record, preferably using ISO standards, and we're then able to disseminate that out to the end consumers, which means that everybody at that point they're all looking at the same version of the truth. So it's a sort of three-step process. But what it has proved to us, even though we've only just completed stage one, which is very exciting, is that we absolutely believe that the combination of LLMs and blockchain and cross-chain dissemination of data has a really big value to bring, not just in corporate actions, but in other data sets as well.
Why are Euroclear and Chainlink so interested in this? Maybe, Stephanie, we can start with you.
Yeah, maybe I will start with the value of the use case and the value of the approach. What I like with that is today, as it's a very long problem, and it's a problem for the full industry. And very often when we are talking and working on blockchain, and I'm working on blockchain and digital assets for a very long time, we say, okay, it's a technology that is looking for a problem. Here we are starting from a problem statement, which is really coming from the investors, the buy side, which are at the end of the value chain, saying we need to connect with the issuer to have this information. The information and the golden source is the issuer. And today, because of the way the market is structured, and there are some intermediaries, and they receive this information from the various participants or various data sources, we have this issue and spending some time to reconcile and not being sure of what is the golden source for corporate action notification. So there is a real problem statement coming with that. And then if you start discussing with the industry, the custodians, and the different participants, you realize that it's actually a problem for everybody. Everybody is receiving corporate action from various data sources, doing some reconciliations, harmonization of data, and again, without having a big added value, because at the end, it's public information. So I think that's really something which is bringing a lot of value. If we can find a way to create this golden source and create it from the beginning with a good trust in it, and being able to distribute it to all the participants in the chain, then we can bring value to everybody. So in that sense, and in my perspective, that's one of the big value of DLT, is being able to organize an ecosystem around a golden source. And in that case, this is exactly what we are doing. So I believe it brings value, and it brings value to everybody, which is good, because we are not talking about determination or whatever. We are really talking about bringing value to everybody for our existing process. And then when you think about it, we rely a lot on reference data and static data in the industry. So that's a first example, a first use case around corporate action notification. But if we agree and we can co-create with the rest of the participants on a model using these new technologies that can work, it can work as well for prospectus, for other kind of data. And that's really something which will help reduce some inefficiencies, breaks in the workflows, and which is really something which will bring value even when we are talking about reducing the settlement cycle. If we don't have all these breaks, then we bring value to everything.
Great. Angie, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I think there are three. I think we are at a unique point in the development of various technologies, and I'm obviously very technology focused, and I apologise for that. But I think there are three. It's a little bit like a sort of a perfect moment, really, a perfect storm moment, because we've got three technologies that are coming together at the same time. So the consensus, Chainlink's has this off-chain reporting mechanism, which we've used for Web3. It powers most of Web3, and we've been using it for 8 years, and it's very established as a consensus model. So if you combine the consensus model, which is what combines the results of the LLM to give you the confidence around the actual result, I think that's really important. But if you then combine that with the use of AI and LLMs, and I mean the use of AI and LLMs has come on in leaps and bounds. I'm not even going to say, we talk about blockchain years as being dog years, but I think LLMs are going at a pace far faster than that. So if you combine the consensus capability with the use of AIs and the LLMs and the advancement in that technology and the improvement, if you look at the improvement just in the last 12 months, it is staggeringly fast, right? So imagine where we're going to be in 3 years' time. So when you combine these two together, that's very powerful, because it can give you very, very strong confidence around the output and the results and the elimination of hallucinations, for example. Then when you combine all of that with the ability then to disseminate through cross-chain interoperability, the ability to disseminate the data, and that's not just on-chain, it's off-chain as well, through standard models and through standard messaging, then it becomes really interesting, because it's not just about creating a unified golden record. Once you've created the unified golden record, you've got to be able to disseminate that to people in a form that makes them have confidence that everybody's looking at the same version of the truth. So that's really important, and it's not just people consuming it on blockchains. People need to be able to consume it in existing systems and through existing messaging like Swift messaging. So it's really important that whatever we produce in the form of a unified golden record, we're then actually able to use it, and by the time people consume it, it's in its original form. It hasn't been in any way interfered with or deteriorated. So I think it is a bit of a perfect storm moment, where you've got the combination of the off-chain reporting, the consensus model, which is really well proven and established. You've got the LLM technology moving really fast now, and people starting to gain confidence, and the results we got, even in the first phase, were really very pleasing indeed. We weren't expecting them to be quite as good as they really were. They were fantastic. And then when you combine that with the distribution on-chain and off-chain, it's a really interesting moment. And as Stephanie said, it's not just about corporate actions. I mean, the fact that it takes around 100 people to issue a corporate action is pretty shocking at the moment. So we do need to improve that world. But there are lots of other data sets in regulated market activities that we could actually use this technology for. So I think it's a really interesting journey for the industry as a whole. So
great. Maybe we could take the time now, if you could change the slide, please, to have a look at the Project Calm workflow.
Great representation of the workflow and what we have done.
I thought we need to think of a name that represents calmness. Oh, actually, we'll just call it CALM, Corporate Action Lifecycle Management, and it's stuck with it, hasn't it? So we'll have trouble getting rid of it now.
It's actually a great name. So before going into the workflow, what was super interesting to me is first, so I mentioned it, the problem statement came from buy side. Then we started discussing it with some industry participants, because we wanted to make sure that whatever we are building in terms of workflow makes sense globally, and we saw a lot of traction. So we have some custodians joining as well as the team and the project, and so that we could meet and brainstorm on what it means. And what is also important to mention, I think, is the fact that at the beginning, the workflow was not this one. We had several that came because after a few brainstorming with the participants, we decided that the way to go was actually to start with unstructured data and see how LLM could solve and help solving this problem. So we were already in this co-creation approach with the full industry, which is making a lot of sense to me. So here you can see that what we were aiming to do is use unstructured data. So the use case was about corporate action. We actually used a quite simple corporate action, not starting to use election or voluntary corporate action, but quite simple ones. But the idea was really to see, okay, how can we make sure that we can use this unstructured data, feed different LLM models, and from that extract the same information to create the golden record. And it actually enabled a lot of good discussion about, okay, is it good enough for us to, after that, use that as a basis to actually transfer real money? What about the liability or the responsibility? Do we need to as well have some kind of validation step in the workflow to make sure that it is trustable enough? And how can we use it in production for real processes? So all these discussions have started to take place. Everything is not solved yet because it's, as Angie mentioned, a first step. But a really good baseline for all these projects. So unstructured data, LLM models, then depending on the results and the consensus around the data which are extracted by the three models, we create the golden record. If everything is green, everything has been reconciled, then it's green, it's okay. Otherwise, it's created, but we can already highlight what are the discrepancies, which is already an improvement with what happens today, just to know what is wrong and how should I look at the data I received. And then after that, maybe you want to explain a little bit more the SDLT part, or I can...
Yeah, no worries. So when we consume the data into the large language models, as Stephanie was saying, we did start with 3. To be honest, this was the first pass, and we didn't want to do it with 1. We felt 2 wasn't quite enough, so we settled on 3. We would love to do more, and hopefully we will do more in subsequent phases. But once we'd consumed the unstructured data into the LLMs and we'd reached consensus, then we were able to create this sort of unified golden record output, which is what you see to the right of the LLMs as you look at it. And we tried to use SMPG framework in order to give it a level of structure, which we talked about earlier on, trying to get to achieve standardization wherever we possibly can, which is hopefully commensurate with the forum we're in. And then once we'd got that unified golden record, we then passed that into Chainlink's cross-chain interoperability platform, so we could then disseminate that out to the chains of the individual consumers. Now, I'll cover non-blockchain in a second, but the important thing was each and every one of those consumers could choose what chain they were on. It was entirely up to them. And we had a mixture of custodian banks, investment banks, and buy-side. So it was actually a nice mixture of different types of consumers who hopefully will be able to take that unified golden record and use it in different ways, but with an equal level of value or certainly a significant value. And we disseminated the data out to the chains, and then obviously is what we would like to do in the next phase is effectively start to use the ISO and the MT messaging, so we can then disseminate the same unified golden record out to consumers on the SWIFT network. Again, it's the same data structure, but effectively using a different message format for the dissemination of the actual record itself. So the point is that we don't discriminate from a technology perspective. We are supporting both blockchain and traditional technology when it comes to the dissemination of the unified golden record. And one of the things we'd love to do in the next phase, and we're thinking of lots of different things we'd love to do in the next phase, but we're obviously going to be more sophisticated in how we optimize the use of the LLMs. We didn't touch them in the first phase. We just pushed the data in and accepted what came out the other side. obviously there's refinement and optimization that we can do, and that's one of the things we're interested in doing in the subsequent phases. So that's the workflow as it stands. We're trying to standardize as much as we possibly can every step of the way, so that the beneficiaries can consume that data both on chain and off chain through the Swift network.
Maybe if I can just add something. What is interesting as well in this workflow, I think, is the Swift part at the end. Being able to have an integration in the existing value chain, I think it's super key in terms of adoption by the industry, because we cannot have something which works on the side. It has to integrate with the existing systems of all the participants. So that part is, for me, a key part as well in everything we are doing. And at Euroclear, we are building some projects on digital assets, always keeping in mind this user experience and this integration with existing systems. So that's the first thing. And I was having a lunch with an actual issuer today, discussing a little bit about presenting the project. And I think maybe the LLM model is super good when we don't have the direct connectivity with issuer or with the agent. But then if we are also able to connect issuer by side and having this kind of network, when we have a direct link and create a golden source closer to the source, the original source, which is the issuer, it's super interesting as well as next step to really bring value and link the gaps or connect the dots.
Okay, a couple of rapid fire questions because I see time is running out. Maybe one or two key takeaways, Angie. First question for you, and then Stephanie, if there's anything you really find is missing from this.
Yeah, so I think the first one is it definitely ticks the box on us being able to consume large amounts of unstructured data. That's the first thing. So taking something which is human readable, like PDFs and emails and documents, and making them that unstructured data machine readable, I think, is a big tick in the box for lots and lots of people. There are, that's a very manual process. Second point is it was very pleasing in terms of the results. We did not fiddle with or optimize or try to fine tune the LLMs. We just took them in their raw form, and even in their raw form, the results were really promising. So we're very excited about some of the things we could do in subsequent phases. And then for me, the third takeaway, which is again a continuation of what we achieved with the DTCC, with the SmartNav program, was we're effectively taking that data and we can make that effectively like a near real-time process. So rather than it being a sort of T+X process on you consuming the data, going through a load of manual processing and then spitting it out the other side, what we're actually able to do is get fairly close to near real time by combining the inbound ingestment of the data into a machine readable form, the LLMs and the output. So that's again giving us an opportunity to reduce the time between the publication of that information and the dissemination of the unified golden record. So they're all really big, individually they're big steps forward, but if we combine them, it gets really exciting.
So what's next?
What's next, Stephanie?
First takeaway, I think, is it triggers a lot of interest, and it's worth mentioning. Yeah. It triggers an interest before we started the actual project and the workshops, etc., because we had a lot of great discussions, engaged discussion, suggestion in terms of how to improve the workflow, etc., before the project. Then we had the workshop, the sessions themselves, and I've been participating in some similar projects, and that's really one project where people were super engaged, a lot of really good discussions from everybody. So, and then you mentioned as well, Angie, that the report is now public. You can invite you to download it and look at it. But a great hit and really triggers interest. So we can see that that's a good sign that we are really addressing a pain point and a topic which interests can bring value, let's say. So that will be my main takeaway of this part. And then what's next? I think we need to discuss and brainstorm on a path to production. I think how we can actually make that reality. Then some questions, legal questions and adoption questions are still to be solved, addressed, etc. As well as maybe fine-tune again the use case, which kind of, where will we bring the most value that will drive this adoption, what kind of use case, is it on more complex corporate actions or specific ones? So that's discussions that we have started to have, but we should dive deeper to really have the identify with the participants, and more if they want to join, but a path to production to actually deliver this value to the industry.
Wonderful. Maybe take a minute or two to mention the press release that came out yesterday, Angie.
Oh, I will do. I just wanted to mention one thing about the what's next as well. To add to what Stephanie commented on, we definitely want to look at more complex forms of corporate actions as well, extend the universe, because it was European centric for phase one. We'd like to incorporate equities and bonds in APACs, because we promised that we would extend that for phase two. Obviously extend out the SWIFT workflows, which are really important. And then some of the things that came up that were really important were, well, the liability. Repeatedly, we had conversations and discussions around the liability model, because it does change the liability model. So I know that's something that needs to be debated aside from the technology and the workflow, and things like the operate model, because it's very obvious that this cannot be operated by a single financial institution. It needs to be a collaboration between market infrastructures and the consumers of that data. So I think some really interesting conversations to be had further down the line. What I would say is, from a collaboration point of view, it's one of the most, and certainly one of the most rewarding collaborations I've been involved in. Stephanie, probably you would agree with me, actually having people from all parts of the market all come together and want to collaborate and be very focused on it. And we've had a number of people come to us since to say they very much want to join us for the next phase. And it's not for commercial gain at this point until the consumers and the people involved decide how they deliver it as a service. But so that was very rewarding. We did issue a press release, and actually we've never seen so many hits. It's the most hits we've ever seen on a single press release, certainly in the history of Chainlink. So we were very pleased with that. We had something like, I don't want to quote the exact number, but it was something like 700,000 hits in the first 5 hours, which is very unusual. So it was very positive. We do have quite a big following on LinkedIn, but that was an exceptionally large number of hits. And we think that it is genuinely of interest to the market. So we look forward to continuing our journey. So
wonderful. Well, I think we may have time for one question from the audience. If anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. Juliette?
Thank you for your presentation. I wondered if you could explain what's in it for the asset issuer to work this way versus what he does today, which is to send unstructured data to, for example, an issuer CSD. What's in it for him to work this way?
I can start. I think it's value for everybody, and I don't know if there is an issuer that wants to explain with its own point of view. But when you have some investors, you are looking to have investors investing in your products, the products that you issue, you want that everything, all the asset servicing works well for them as well. So today, they know it's a pain in an investor point of view. So if we can solve that in his behalf for the investors, then I think they are happy with that. Even if that's not that direct problem, that's the problem of their investors. So that's their problem in a sense.
All right, I think that wraps it up. Stephanie, Angie, thank you very much.